Okay, welcome to my basement. So, this is where you'll get a lot of the new recordings. As my dog tries to come here. Come here, sit. Come here, there you go, come on up. Nope, okay. So, that was him. He's very confused. He's like, what are you doing, Dad? I'm trying to come down here. He's just sitting over here on the couch. You can see my kids' play space. There's my ring light. There's their bounce house. The trampoline's over there. The dog's sitting right there. So, I'm going to try to figure out how I can get this circle away from here, but for right now, it gives me enough light, and we're going to work with it. So today is really not, a new lesson. It's just expounding on what we've already done. So what we know, based off of the first two classes, we know that y divided by x gives us our constant. We know that once we have the constant, we can write an equation that will help us find any unknown value. So once we have the constant, we can write the equation y equals kx. And you might say, Mr. H, how are you getting that? Well, you don't know enough about equations yet, but I can manipulate this by multiplying both sides by x. Those will divide out, and that leaves me y equals kx. So that's how I'm getting this equation. So we're on that packet. Question 1 says, hey, you're making $8 an hour. If we want to keep this proportional, how can we figure this out? So if it's $8 in 1 hour, we can at least find this first step out. We've got 1 hour worked, $8 paid. Now, your notes will talk about A and B. We talk about Y and X because that's more of a familiar term for math moving from this point forward. Think about it this way. In our alphabet, we've got X followed by Y. So this will be my X, always will be on the left. My Y will always be on my right. So if I do Y divided by X, my constant is 8 divided by 1, which is 8. So our constant is going to stay the same at 8. So what does this do for us as I move us back a little bit? Well, we now have our constant of 8. So k is 8. If I know what my constant is, I can find everything else because we use k in order to write an equation for unknown values. Proportional relationships means the constant stays the same. So I have y equals 8x. This is our mammer jammer of an equation. This is the important thing right there. Because now I can substitute in my other values to find the unknowns. So I know my x value is 2. So I have y equals 8 times 2, which gives me $16. Then I have y equals 8 times 3. What I'm doing now is based off of the constant, the equation, I'm able to substitute in. That leaves me 24. 4 leaves me 32. I'm going to skip 4.5, go to 5. That leaves me 40. 6 times 8 is 48. And we're going to come back to these. Does 4.5 and 6 5/10 really change the problem? No, it does not. So if I'm dealing with 4.5, use your calculator, and instead of using 4 and 1/2, change 1 divided by 2 to a decimal, and that leaves me 8 times 4 5/10, which gives me 36. Same thing here, 6 5/10 is 52. Now, if we wanted to go back and double check, because this is what today's lesson is, to see if something is proportional, and I need to figure out this camera because you can barely see my head. Hold on. And I want you to be able to see me so you can see how much I love math. So, the key to this is making sure that, yeah, we already knew the constant, but we need to double check. So, is it proportional? And that's the question that today's lesson is asking. Is it proportional? In order to find out if something is proportional, we are going backwards. And we're saying, okay, 8 divided by 1 is 8, which is the k. 16 divided by 2 is 8, which is the k. 24 divided by 3 is 8. Notice how a constant, and remember, constants stay the same. The constants are staying the same. I cannot stop with just these 3. If you're checking to see if something is proportional, you need to check all of them. Okay? So, let's go to that second problem. The second problem now states we have 210, 612, 816. So let me write this down. So we've got x, we've got y. We've got 210, 816. We've got, oh, I forgot 612. I'll just put it here, 612. And 2 1/2, 5. 2 5/10. And 5. And last but not least, 7 and 14. And the question is it proportional? So, we've got our x value, we've got our y value. To find if it's proportional, we use y divided by x equals k. The reason we're using this is for it to be proportional, there needs to be a constant for every pair of ratios. Because remember, proportions are a comparison of 2 ratios. They have to be equal. So we're going to start here. We're going to say, okay. And we can see that. Hopefully I'm going to come check the computer screen. Let's move this a little bit. Okay. So we've got y divided by x, which is 10 divided by 2, which is 5. Okay. I'm going to put all my constants there. These are my k's. So for this to be proportional, all of my following k's, the constants, need to be 5. Y divided by x equals 16 divided by 8, which equals 2. Immediately, you can stop. You should know one thing. The constants are not the same. If they are not the same, it is not proportional. And as we start moving forward with these proportions, we're going to start graphing. And when we graph, for it to be proportional, it needs to be a linear graph. Linear meaning line. It has to be a straight line. So, even though this isn't part of the lesson, I want to kind of give you that next step. If I've got my graph and I'm going to count by 2's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16. 2, 4, 2, 4. So my first ordered pair is at 2, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. My next is at 2, 4, 6, 8, up 16. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, which is somewhere here. That's linear, but then we go to 6, up 12. And right now, if you look, notice how it doesn't stay linear. There's that curve happening. We don't want a curve. Hopefully you can see that. I'm blocking the light. Guys, I'm trying to figure this out to give you the best quality. It's going to get better throughout the year, especially once my wife and I finish this basement and I can have an office. Okay, so when we start to graph, especially on graph paper, which you'll be doing, hint, 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 these need to be linear in order to be proportional. Okay, so when we are checking for proportionality, y divided by x, which is k, has to stay the same for everything. So a type of quantity is proportional to a second if there is a constant that the product of each number measure, or that the product of each measure of the first type and the constant is equal to the corresponding measure of the second type. All that means is this k needs to be the same. So right now you know two equations, y divided by x equals k. That helps us find the constant. This helps us find whether something is proportional. The other equation is y equals kx. We already have to know the constant in order to have this equation, because once we have the constant, then we can substitute in any numbers to find an unknown value, like we did for our first example. Okay, so that takes care of us for this lesson. Make sure you ask any questions if you're confused.